Hello, this is Professor Warwath. I want to talk about client management for negotiations, specifically within a public tender scenario. So the approach here is that obviously, state and local governments often have large scale procurements. I particularly worked in the public safety radio arena. So these were computer aided dispatch systems, 911 systems that were used by county government, state government, and city government. Chicago Police Department, for example, or LAPD or NYPD. These are, multi-million dollar procurements of radio equipment, both fixed equipment, base stations, antennas, sites that were built out with Radio Shacks, as well as individual, portable and mobile radio equipment that would interact with this fixed end. These are networks that we're competing with against other companies in the space. And frankly, that was what made it both possible to have a public tender and also what made it very interesting from a game theory perspective, right? Let me get started here. Okay, so the focus of the talk is to talk about managing expectations with your client. This is an ongoing process from start to finish. And start for many companies was often late. And the key you'll find out soon enough is that the sooner you get involved, the more likely you'll have some leverage, and you'll also have some knowledge, and you'll also have some ability to take advantage of that time frame before the bid is released to the public and before competitors have a chance to work on it. You've already been working on it. You've been working on it for months, if not longer. So this is a competitive bidding situation. We'll be talking about pre-tender, award, and post-award phases of the project. I've worked on all three multiple times in both domestic and international scenarios. Public tenders are under a lot of scrutiny. All bids eventually become public domain, so they get published. As a result, you get to see your competitors, and your competitors get to see your bid. And this is, of course, after the submission and after the client has a chance to review it and make their award decision. It's usually led by these tenders are let by state and local governments. They're published ahead of time so that people know what the time frame is, the timing for submission, the timing for release, etc. There must be full transparency, right? So these must be unbiased processes managed by state and local governments, eventually subject to legal discovery, usually requires two or more competitive and compliant bidders. But if you don't have two or more bidders, you can't have a tender. You can't actually, you'll have to shut down the whole tender process. So there's at least a minimum of two competitive, and ultimately one has to be at least compliant bidder to make the bid successful. They're usually organized as follows. There's always a commercial terms section, which is, terms and conditions, technical specifications, and of course, acceptance test procedures or ATPs. The engineers are typically focused on the last two, and the business folks are usually focused on the commercial terms. The game, if you want to think of it as a game theory, right? This simple 2x2 compares your low cost offering and your premium offering on the x-axis. On the y-axis, you're looking at the competitor's low cost offering and the competitor's premium offering on the y-axis, okay? Your sweet spot is the upper left quadrant, right? So your low cost offering going up against their high cost offering. Ultimately, this is a game of pricing. And if you can drive your pricing down while driving your competitor's pricing up, the upper left-hand quadrant is your sweet spot. Competitor's sweet spot, ironically, of course, is the lower right, where they're basically saying they have your premium offering going up against their low-cost offering. So this is how, I guess, the game is played, right? The specs, if you want to think of them as a pendulum that might swing between, does it favor one competitor or does it favor you? But frankly, you want to steer things to the upper left-hand quadrant as much as you can. I mentioned earlier, early involvement is key, right? It allows you to scope out sites, scope out suppliers, start the dialogue with the client, understand the requirements in a more subtle way. Perhaps you can steer things in your direction, secure the locations and suppliers ahead of your competition. So, I mean, if it's literally building radio sites, topographically, there's probably a handful of ideal sites. If you're there first, you get to put bids and offers on those sites, or at least have options that you can exercise that would preclude your competitors from getting access to those sites. You can learn about subtleties. It's also not a time to economize. I know some companies that would only put one or two people in the field ahead of a major bid. I would say this is not the time to economize, right? Don't scrimp and save here. This is a time to learn, a time to move quickly, a time to influence, and a time to plant ideas, plant a direction that you would like to see. Again, with the 2x2 matrix in mind, right? How you would steer this if you had any opportunity to steer it, right? Through your dialogue with your client, right? Let me ask you a question, very basic question. Who would you rather do business with? Somebody who you've been working with for 2 years on a bid and a tender, or would you rather work with somebody who showed up in the last 2 months, right? I've seen both situations, and generally the early bird does catch the worm. The people who've been there 2 years have the advantage. What do I mean by commercial terms? I mentioned commercial terms before: governing laws, dispute resolution, price and delivery expectations, timelines, progress payments, title transfer, which involves insurance, Incoterms, things of that nature that get into the commerciality of the deal, right? The overall process looks like this. You have the design of the RFQ, you have the tender being offered out there, and then the post award. Each phase has its own advantages to you, I guess. It's almost like, a season of what you can do and what you can accomplish. In the first phase, it's the best time to influence the design of the tender, the specifications, the ATP. It's usually dominated by hired consultants, so your client will hire people who are experts in the technology to work on their behalf. Um, Try to add items here that are easy for you to deliver at low cost and expensive for your competition. So if you can skew things in that direction, you're subtly making the price on your side more affordable and on your competitor side less affordable. During the tender itself, it's usually a very rigorous process. Best time to ask clarifying questions, but that's always going to be in public, so your competition will hear those questions as well. If there's any ambiguity at all, you want the ambiguity decided in your favor, right? Ask questions that clarify in your favor, develop a detailed and specific as well as compliant proposal. So they're going to ask you point by point requirements. And if you're not compliant on every single point, you will probably be thrown out. So every detail matters, every specification matters. This is not a time to exaggerate, because if you are exaggerating, it will be caught by your competitors and they'll say, time out, so and so said they were compliant and we can show that they're not. Lastly, the post award. This is after the contract's been let. Hopefully you've won it at this point. The best time to manage expectation and stick to your proposed solution. Clients are known to want to expand the scope at no extra cost. It's your job as the project manager to contain that scope. Maintain good relations with your client, earn their respect, deliver on what you say you're going to deliver, meet their expectations, but hold them accountable as well, right? They have deliverables as well that are just as important as yours. Deliver on time, on budget, as in your proposal. You will gain their trust and you will gain their respect. And that is half the battle in this whole game, because there are going to be times when you need some of their, I guess, leniency, right? And hopefully you've earned it along the way. The lowest cost compliant bid usually wins. The lowest cost compliant bid usually wins the award. You need to have a lower price or show that your competitor's bid is non-compliant. Your bid is, again, in the public domain after submission, as well as your pricing. So it'll become published and everyone will be able to see it, right? So how do you maximize margin? How do you, quote unquote, play this game? Show pricing is what you're showing line by line, right? For each item in the bid. One strategy is to basically take typical add-on items. In our case, it would be mobiles and portable radios, right? Where they're likely to buy more. And you can show a higher price for those on a per item basis, right? The items that are one-time only procurements can therefore be heavily discounted. So what you're showing is a tendency to have lower discounts on heavily used items and higher discounts on less used items. Be careful in setting precedent, right? So everything you publish will become discoverable to the next procurement. So if you say, I'm going to sell this item for X price, that becomes the floor for your next negotiation on your next bid. Because again, that is publicly, disclosed. How much discount you're applying to this bid is already, out in the wild as soon as your bid is submitted, right? Manage change requests carefully. So what I mean by this is not a time to necessarily discount heavily. This is a time to understand scope, to set expectations about timing, and to make sure you're comprehensive, right? So you don't want to nickel and dime them. If they need a new piece of equipment, do they need spare batteries? Do they need documentation? Do they need training? Get it all done at once. Bundle the whole thing together so that they have a comprehensive proposal and not piecemeal. The client tendencies, again, are to want added items at no added cost to them. It's up to the program manager to manage these expectations, match your bid, and to quote added items when client desires more than what is in your bid. Your favorite term might become that's out of scope, but I'll be glad to quote it. And as long as you're amiable and fair and correct about what's in the scope of the contract and not trying to cheat your customer out of something that you actually committed to deliver under contract, right? So they're going to be very carefully scrutinizing that contract as well as you should be. So if you're not an expert in your contract with your client, you're going to be in trouble. So with that, hopefully that gives you a sense of how to manage, these public tenders and these, public entity projects based on the experiences that I've had in the field. Take care.